a message for the former Attorney General Pam Bondi: the innocent don't run. That's a quote from Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who led the push to subpoena Bondi for a deposition on her handling of the Epstein investigation. Bondi was supposed to show up next week before the House Oversight Committee, but tonight the DOJ says that since Trump fired her, she doesn't need to come. Here's how the DOJ framed it to Chairman James Comer, saying, quote, because Ms. Bondi no longer can testify in her official capacity as Attorney General, the department's position is that the subpoena no longer obligates her to appear. And we should note, technically, Bondi is still supposed to be working at DOJ to help the acting AG Todd Blanche transition into the role. A spokesperson for the committee says it's not a done deal, that they're working with Bondi's personal counsel to schedule a deposition. The Democrats, like my next guest, say if she doesn't show up, they will move to hold Bondi in contempt. I'm joined now by Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw of Virginia, who sits on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, welcome. Why do you believe the DOJ does not want her to testify?
Well, it's clear that the DOJ failed to comply with the law. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was very clear. All the files had to be released with a narrow category of redactions allowed. They missed the deadline to release the files. They still haven't released 2.5 to 3 million files, and they illegally redacted thousands of files. And they don't want her to testify because we would ask her questions about that. Who made the decision to illegally redact certain files? Who made the decision to stop releasing files before the law was fully complied with? What conversations, if any, took place with President Trump about those decisions? They don't want her to answer questions like that. I think it's quite clear.
It's striking because there have been a number of people who have had very high-profile roles, including a former president of the United States, who have had to answer questions. You're talking about officials who talked to your committee, like the Attorney General Bill Barr, Alex Acosta, obviously the person behind the sweetheart deal in Florida. Others, even Hillary Clinton did her deposition as well. So talk to me about how the survivors are feeling about the prospect of the DOJ trying to get her not to comply with what they say is no longer a relevant subpoena, because they say you must have meant her official capacity, even you said Pam Bondi.
Well, I think it's another betrayal of the survivors who have courageusly and continuously called for transparency and accountability. And that's what we're fighting for and pushing for. Look, the legal argument that because she's no longer Attorney General, the subpoena is no longer valid or doesn't apply to her is laughable on its face. The purpose of the subpoena is to get information relevant to our investigation. That information is in Pam Bondi's head. It was in her head before she was fired. It's in her head today after she's been fired. She needs to show up on April 14th to fulfill her legal obligation, comply with the subpoena, and answer our questions under oath.
Contempt is always, one pathway to do so. There are obviously different ways. There's a civil contempt, a much more lengthy procedure involving a judge. There's criminal contempt, referring it back to her very own department, or sergeant at arms taking her into custody. What is the likelihood of any of those mechanisms working when DOJ is probably certain not to refer her or to prosecute her in some way?
Well, I think with this DOJ, certainly the contempt avenue most likely to succeed would be the civil avenue, which, as you pointed out, would go to the courts and could lead to the imposition of fines, including fines levied each day that she fails to appear and comply with a subpoena. I think that's a very valid and possible option. We might also choose to pursue that criminal contempt option and put DOJ in the position of refusing to prosecute and move forward. I think that would highlight again for the American people the extent of this Trump administration cover-up of the Epstein files.
There have been those who have commented that they believe that you were fine with the Clintons obstructing their subpoenas. That was the phrasing they used for 7 months, and voted against holding them in contempt, telling you to relax, go touch grass was part of the tweet about you. But talk to me about why this is distinguishable from your decision to not try to hold them in contempt.
Well, actually, I voted to hold the Clintons in civil contempt.
Criminal.
That's right. I didn't support criminal contempt because I don't think that would have got us the outcome that we wanted to, which was to have a conversation. I do think it's important to separate Bill and Hillary Clinton here. And I said this throughout that episode. Hillary Clinton had no information, zero, zip, zilch, nada about Epstein, no relationship. The only reason she was forced to participate in the deposition is political purposes. Chairman Comer wanted a Hillary Clinton scalp to put up on his wall. I think he failed. Republicans looked ridiculous in that. Bill Clinton had a relationship with Epstein. Legitimate questions were asked in that deposition. I think it was fruitful. I'm glad that it happened. I supported civil contempt to help ensure that it did happen. Chairman Comer set the precedent here. If you don't show up on the date and time he sets, he moves forward with criminal contempt. I'm sure he's going to do the same for Pam Bondi if she doesn't show up on the date and time he set, which is April 14th.
If you can't get Bondi, are you going to ask for Todd Blanche? He is now the acting Attorney General.
Well, I believe we can and will get Bondi, whether it's this year or next year. But Todd Blanche, at some point, I think we'll have to answer questions as well. And, Attorney General Bondi delegated to Todd Blanche a lot of the day-to-day authority around the Epstein files, perhaps some of the decision-making around those redactions, as he has said. And based on what we hear from Pam Bondi, we might want to ask him questions as well.
I certainly think you'd ask about his visit to see Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, that's just one
right.
thing.
Yeah.
Congressman James Walkinshaw, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. The Story Is with Alex Michelson is up next.